Does this ever happen to you? You're shopping online at one of your favorite stores on eBay, in this case, Anniepoojewels, who I highly recommend. She has very beautiful items and very good prices. I happened upon this beautiful, rare, antique miniature medicine chest, and I fell in love with it. Unfortunately, it's out of my price range. I wish it wasn't, but I really want something like this for my infirmary to go over the sink. And I thought, gee, I don't think there's any way I could even remotely recreate something like that. It's made out of metal, it's expertly done, it's a rare antique. Then I thought, well, what would happen if I started scratching around on some foil? Could I create a little embossed look? Could I do something similar? Not exact, but something that would work for me. I'm going to give it a shot. I wonder what's going to happen. Hi there, Dolly friends. I'm having my morning coffee right now and thought I would play around with some foil and see if I could emboss it. I just took some pieces of foil and started scratching around. I'm using this little Denizen gummed, this vintage box of gummed reinforcements because it's about the size I want, maybe a little bit smaller. Anyway, so I'm just kind of measuring and trying to get an idea of what would be an appropriate size for the scale. I have these blank cards and pieces of cardboard I keep in a little area, and I just took one out. I thought I might use that. I'm going to make it out of cardboard because I don't really have anything else that I can use. The wood I have is too big and I don't have an appropriate means of cutting it. So I'm just going to use some cardboard and cardstock and see what I can come up with. You can see that I already etched a little design on some foil here, and I think I'm just going to use the one I did. What I did was I smoothed out the foil and put it on this piece of foam core and used my little ball tool, which I got from the Dollar Tree, by the way, and just started playing around with it. The foam core allows you to kind of press into it a little bit so that when you turn it around, it will be indented. I'm just showing you what I did. This is just, I wasn't planning to use this piece, but this is all I did. I just kind of free-handed it and did a little design, and that's what it looks like. And I figured if I painted it or treated it somehow, I could give it the look that I'm going for. I'm just cutting a piece for the front and a piece for the back. I'm not planning to have any knob because you'll be able to open it just using your hand. I want to use up this piece of card that I have, so I'm going to cut two strips about 1/3 of an inch each. I figure that'll give me the correct proportion to make the outside of the cabinet. I just love this little Silipod that I bought on Amazon. This plain white glue has been in here for 2 weeks and it's still good and ready to use. I just love this thing. I'm using the very inaccurate but frequently used, that is frequently used by me, method of trial and error to fit the shelves into the box. One of the reasons that I use this method is because It's actually very effective, and measuring takes just as long. I wanted the back piece to be a little bit larger than the frame so that I can just even out the edges. It barely fits top to bottom, but I'll make it work. So much for that very effective. We'll say somewhat effective. While that was drying, I took a quick look for hinges that I'm pretty sure I never bought. So I decided I better find a way to make my own. There are many different videos out there, which I learned, of how to make your own hinges for your projects. I just used the first one I watched, and I'll put a link to it in my description box. I cut a 1/2 inch square and cut out a little notch in the middle. You need 2 identical squares per hinge. I'm only going to use 1 hinge for this cabinet. After more trial and error method, I came to the conclusion that fabric tack was my best option. So for the first one, you're going to use a piece of wire or a paper clip or whatever you have that could work. I'm just using a little piece of wire I had. I'm letting it stick out so that it will be easier for me to cut the end off, and it'll be easier for me to handle until I do that. So then you fold it in half over the wire. And for the second piece, I just wrapped it around a darning needle. And when you put the glue on, be sure you don't put it in the rounded area, because that is where your little wire peg will be inserted to create your hinge. So you could wrap the paper also around a toothpick or anything at all that would work. So I just put the fabric tack on one side of this paper, and being careful not to get any in the hole, I folded it over. See the little hole? That's where my peg's going to go. I'll just let those dry for a minute. Well, let's see how it works. Look at that. I just used cardstock for these, by the way. It just occurred to me how convenient it would be to make these out of tin foil, or even the metal, the lightweight metal that's on the back of tea lights. I thought it might be kind of fun and whimsical to put a piece of paper along the back of the cabinet. I think that's something I would do to cover up a surface that was kind of old and dingy, similar to using contact paper in drawers, I suppose. I'm going to put the paper in last because I know that in my clumsiness, I will destroy it with paint and glue, and it will get worse than whatever it's trying to cover up. Of course, I didn't have any gray paint, so I'm making my own. I thought I would paint as a primer the surfaces in gray. I don't really know how to do the paint, so I'm just kind of practicing. I had a piece of the same cardstock that I was using, and I just kind of practiced with some different color combinations, but I definitely wanted to use a gray primer. It's helpful when you're painting something metallic, or it just makes a nice primer. I glued the foil piece that I embossed onto the front cardstock, and it took a couple coats, so I had to be patient, which is really, really hard, but it's just acrylic, so it dries very quickly. This is the front piece. I'd like to find a little round mirror to put inside here. Maybe something the size of, say, a quarter or something. I'm going to add some silver paint now. This step, and here are the hinges. I'm not going to put silver paint on the inside of the cupboard door But like I said, I would like to find a mirror. So I wasn't happy with the plain silver, so I mixed it with some zinc to get it just a little bit darker. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to achieve here. I think my thought was that I am going to paint over it like my inspiration cabinet. I think my thought was that if the paint chipped or some of the undercolor showed through, you would see that it was metal. And if that's not a satisfactory explanation, I guess you could just think of it as another coat of primer. I'm using a white primer on the front door of the cabinet. This is actually a metallic white, but you don't need to use a metallic white. I thought it might add a little shimmer when I add the top coat, but it didn't. So you could just use plain white, and you don't have to cover every inch of it. In fact, it's better if you leave some of it exposed. It would naturally chip off a little bit, I think. And I'm really kind of going for a more tin look rather than the heavy enamel look. I feel like I've seen these types of pieces before, and they're really quite charming, but they're a little less sturdy than the enamel pieces that you see. I don't know if it would actually have ever been used for something like a cabinet door or not. I didn't really do any research about it, but I wanted this kind of look, and I wanted it for the sink in the infirmary. So I'm just, going for it. I like that kind of buttery yellow that's in my inspiration piece. So I'm going to use this color is actually vanilla, but it has that buttery pale yellow look, which I really, really like. While the door dries, I'm going to go ahead and do the outside of the cabinet body. And it took a couple coats. I ideally do not want to see any brush strokes. Optimally, I guess you could spray paint it, but it's such a small piece and I'm way too lazy for that. I imagine the shelves inside a cabinet like this might also be metal, so I'm just painting them this pearly metallic white, but I will distress them a little bit. Here's the door. I did 2 coats of the yellow on the door and I'm very happy with it. I distressed it a little bit by putting the tiniest bit of black paint on my finger. So I did kind of a dry brush technique, only I used my finger and I could get the edges and a little bit of the ridges. And I did the same thing on the outside of the cabinet and I got pretty much exactly the look I was going for. So I'm really, really happy with that. And I am going to put my little paper inside. I really feel like I made it looks like metal to me. It even has a little bit of a bent look like this type of thin metal would have. So that's really what I was trying to achieve. Now the bent look comes from the moisture being on the paper or the cardboard, but I think it really adds to the effect. What do you think? My hinges are so large that I thought I would just try to get away with putting one hinge in the middle. So I'm just cutting off that little extra bit of wire and I'm trying to find the best placement for it. I'm placing the hinge on the very edge of the cabinet door, and this was a mistake. I should have moved it inward just a little bit, and I do end up changing it. It should really be it should be just a little bit more toward the middle of the door for proper placement of the door. I just used tacky glue to glue the hinges down. works out okay, but the door should be centered over the cabinet, so I'm going to move it. Here's a final look. I am really pleased with the way it came out. I probably should add more hinges on the top and bottom. I probably shouldn't have done a center hinge. I think this is probably, you know, constructively speaking, a no-no. But I'm learning and it's all good. I'm really happy with the way it looks. Let's see, I don't have too many things to go inside it. I did make a teeny tiny little toothbrush, but you're not even going to be able to see it really very well. I'll see if I can get a picture and insert it here. Now I need to determine exactly what I want to go inside and make some of those things. Let's go hang it up in the infirmary. Well, I am so pleased with the way this turned out. I was just playing around in the morning with some foil to see what I could do, and I really like it. What do you think? I would love to hear your comments and your ideas and your thoughts about this little project of mine. I appreciate all your comments so much. I hope you know that. I enjoy so much conversing with all of you in the comments. If this is your first time to my channel, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope that you'll consider subscribing. If you want to see what I end up putting inside this cabinet, come back and visit me next time in the doll cupboard.